Welcome to Forbidden Planet TV, and welcome to the Forbidden Planet TV green room in our secret location in the centre of London. I'm Andrew Sumner, and I'm very pleased and privileged to be joined by our old friend, Victoria Elizabeth Schwab. How are you?
I'm very well. Little tour tired, little weary, but very happy to be here.
It's so great to see you again, mate. And of course, right now, you're in the throes of your tour for your latest novel, The Fragile Threads of Power. And this behind us is the exclusive Forbidden Planet edition. Do you know what? Is this time for tea?
Yeah,
Victoria?
it is time for tea.
It's time for tea.
It's time for tea. Thank you so much. I can't go anywhere without a cup of tea.
And I actually, there's a cup of tea over there in the dark side of the moon mug as well.
I know.
Yeah, what? Yeah.
I was like, I feel like you got luck. You got the.
I always do.
You always get the best mug. It's fine. Anyway.
The lunatic is on the grass. So, this is your beautiful sprayed edge, sprayed edge Forbidden Planet edition.
They are so stunning, and I have to admit, I am quite partial not only to the end papers inside, but to the fact that my name is so big.
Yes, indeed. Yeah,
I know, it's so much bigger than any other part of the book. I love it.
And to do a little bit of book constructionism,
Sure.
deconstructionism for a second. So we've got those lovely end papers. We've got nice embossing.
Yeah.
And you've got, they are so lovely, and they match.
I know, they're beautiful.
They match your spray.
They are really gorgeous.
Victoria, this is a wonderful piece of work.
Thank you.
You must be very proud of it.
I am, it's almost 7 years in the making. Yeah. Coming back to the world of Shades of Magic, not something I did lightly. Yeah. I was quite proud of how I concluded that, but about halfway through the writing of Conjuring of Light, which is the third book in Shades of Magic, I started to feel a nostalgia for something I hadn't finished yet. I'm normally quite ready to be done with the story and move on to the next thing, and I just realized I was going to miss it. And so I planted a little plot thread in the book that would just be a little cracked open door in case I wanted to come back. And then by the time I had finished Conjuring of Light, I knew I would come back. But it took me another 2 years almost to come up with the storyline that I wanted for Threads of Power. I didn't want to repeat myself. I wanted to take on some new challenges. And so, it's been almost 7 years.
Wow, 7 years in the making. And where were you in the world when you wrote this?
That's a great question. Where wasn't I? Let's see.
Hence the question.
Yeah, I actually wrote almost all of this in Scotland, where I live, in Edinburgh, in a tiny little coffee shop at the end of my street because they give my dog free sausage.
Yes.
And so basically every morning I would walk down the block to my coffee shop and get a pot of tea for me and a sausage for the dog, and I would just chip away at it for about 1.5 years.
Amazing. And what can you share with me about the fabric of this novel?
Well, we pick up 7 years after the end of Shades of Magic. It is designed as an entry point for anyone who's just joining us. So it is a book 4 or a book 1. It's either book 4 in the Shades of Magic series or book 1 in the Threads of Power series. And I say that because we come up 7 years after the end of Conjuring of Light. 7 years is really a special number if you think about it. It's the time it takes our cells to regenerate. It's the time it takes a child to become an adolescent to become a young adult to become adult. And so the main cast of Shades of Magic are still in this. They're about 50% of the story, but it is their aftermath from Shades of Magic. And for the new characters in Threads of Power, it's their prequel. Yeah. And so the two new leads at the center of this story, interestingly enough, 2 of them are teenage girls. And this is very much not a young adult novel. It is a very adult novel, but I really wanted to put these 2 teenage girls in the center because I think I'm most interested in origin stories. And I wanted to look at the evolution of a person from childhood into adult, because so much of this series, all 4 books, is about trauma and legacy and how what happens to us in our past affects how we trust, how we make decisions, how we act and react in our present and our future. And so we meet Tess and Kosika, and Tess is a 15-year-old runaway living in Red London, running a repair shop, because she has the unique ability, much like the girl on the cover, she has the unique ability to not only see the threads of power that make up the world, the magic that makes up the world, she has the ability to interact with it and to change it and to essentially change the fabric of reality that way. And because she's on the run from what we do not know, she has decided to put this power to use fixing broken things. And then one day a man comes into the shop with a broken object, so broken that she's not actually sure what it's supposed to be. So it piques her curiosity and she agrees to try and fix it. At the same moment that happens, Lila Bard, one of our heroes from the first series, is called to the floating market where she owes a favor. And she is told that an object has been stolen from the floating market and that it is badly damaged, but still so dangerous that it could disrupt the world. And so that's where our past and present storylines converge. At the same time, though, we have Kosika, who is a 14-year-old queen in White London, has been queen for 7 years, since she was 7 years old, which she started her ascendancy the day that Conjuring of Light ends. And so everyone's aftermath is everyone else's origin story, and yeah, that's where we come back to.
So fascinating. Can we talk a bit about the theme of fixing broken things and the concept of? I think that's such an interesting parallel with the world in which we live, where there are so many things that don't work as they should or as we wish they might. Yeah. What does that say to you? What's interesting about that?
Well, I think it's that magic, which is our conduit for power in this world, both literal and metaphorical and political. Magic is both constructive and destructive, right? Magic has the ability to build and it has the ability to dismantle and to disrupt. The only thing about magic is that it can't be unmade. It can't cease to exist. It's like energy, like all other forms of energy. It can be moved about. And so this series is really an examination of power and disruption and also healing and mending and recreating. The thing about Tess is that, yes, she fixes broken things, but she also takes unbroken things and makes them a little better. And so I think invention is also at the heart of this. The Queen in Red London is an inventor, and she is looking from a scientist's perspective in terms of science as it relates to magic, in terms of the evolution of it. Can it be made better? Can it be made sleeker? A lot of people obviously think that they're doing good or that change is always good, and it's really a matter of perspective. The thing about this series is that there is no good and bad, there's only perspective. And there's an uprising happening trying to take a king off the throne. There's, another world crumbling, another world being born, and it's this sense of it's not really what we do, it's the reasons why we do it. And everyone in the story is acting from a place of intense belief in what they're doing. And that's the thing, is I don't really write apathy. And the thing about when you have power and belief together is it really starts to dismantle the concept of hero and villain, because everyone from their own perspective is the hero of the story.
That's I think that's very well said. I mean, I think the interesting thing about your work is people often talk about intellectual rigor as it applies to science, and I think it's a very interesting thing to explore. But your work has a lot of that, but it's filled with what I would call emotional rigor. There's a lot. You've given a tremendous amount of thought to the way that emotion comes into our lives, comes into the lives of your characters.
I think I just like to make everything small. I think like when you write fantasy, there's this idea that the themes have to be huge. They have to be world domination. They have to be universe moving. But at the end of the day, whether we're writing about multiple, alternate realities or something that's happening in our own world, what we relate to as a reader isn't the big idea, it's the small idea. Most of us can't really relate to the concept of world domination, but we've all been slighted by someone. Yeah. We've all held a grudge. We've all lost someone. We've all gained something and not, wanted to part with it. And so no matter how big the story I'm trying to tell, I do always take it down to the emotional basics, because I think at the end of the day, it is about interpersonal conflict and it is about internal conflict. And I really want to take my characters apart and understand what makes them tick as people. I think my biggest goal is to make you believe as the reader that these are people, not characters. And the difference being that characters cease to exist when you're not reading about them and people don't. Yeah. And I've tried for years now to make you believe that when you put down my books, that the people in them keep living. You're simply not allowed to go with them anymore. And so, I think the core at the center of that, like the key to it, is just to understand that there is no good and bad. There is no absolutes. Yeah. Everyone is operating from a deeply seated personal belief set. Even if that personal belief set is ambition, is upheaval, is self-gain, it's still personally invested.
I think that's very interesting and very well said. These beautifully drawn characters that you create, how do they come to you? I mean, can you put that into words? Is it? Do you feel your way through it? Do they come to you fully formed?
No, I build them. I like to play God, so I build them piece by piece. I get a sense of what their fears are, what they want, what they're willing to do to get what they want. I look into their past and I kind of ask what possible things could have happened to make them the people that they are now. If they need to be distrustful, I look at who has let them down. If they need to be, a clinging attachment style, I look at the why. And so I kind of build them from the foundation, because the fact is all of us as we are right now are a product of everything we've been through. And it's not about knowing every single thing that's happened in my characters' lives, but it's about knowing the highlights and the lowlights, the formative moments. When I feel like I have a good sense of them, I like to stress test them. And the way that I do this is I essentially build a diorama for them. I build a little scene, like a tavern, and I drop them into it. And I see how they move through it in different permutations so that I can start to predict how they will. And then I know that they're ready to be written when I can then drop 2 other kinds of characters into the scene and predict their movements. And the 2 other kinds of characters are ones that make them feel safe and ones that don't make them feel safe. And I think when you can see how people react when they have their guard down and how people react when they have their guard up, you can really start to get a sense of their love language, their fighting style, everything about them. It's all holistic. I don't like to give them an attribute that can't be accounted for. I don't give them a personality element that can't be accounted for. I think it all comes from somewhere.
I think that is absolutely fascinating, and I think that the fact that it exists as a play that you've mounted within your mind, as a movie that you've shot within your mind, that's such a fascinating thing with the variable elements to it.
And I play everything that I write is a movie in my head. And I mean, down to the set design, the color palette, the atmosphere, the score, the way that the camera moves through the scene. I see all of that. And then my job, in my opinion, is to transcribe it on paper so that the exact same film plays in your head. And I want all of the films to be different, but I want them to all feel like mine.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I think there's a real beauty to that as well. It must be tremendously satisfying.
I think it is. I'm a deep planner, again, with that desire to play God. I'm a big planner. And so for me, the joy of discovery comes in the brainstorming set. But when it comes to the actual writing of the book, I'm executing a plan. And I think that there's nothing more satisfying than when I've successfully done that.
But that's mechanism or invention, right? Mechanism and invention. And if you think, I guess another metaphor for science and magic is the mechanism of creativity, right? Which is parallels the topics of your work.
And you can tell I have a very math science brain. Like, I was originally supposed to be an astrophysicist, and then I went into fiction instead. I don't know why I chose a field with no objective truths, but yeah, I do think that people think that books are art only, and I think that they're also math, because when we come to revising them, especially my novels tend to be multiple characters and nonlinear structure. I kind of have to braid it all together. I need to have a really solid understanding of timeline, of point of view, of how each beat fits into the greater whole. I mean, when I plan out a story, I plan out every scene before I start writing. So something like Fragile Threads of Power probably has 200 scenes that I know before I actually start writing the book. And I know their order as well. It doesn't surprise me to hear you say that, but I just find it so interesting. To take actually, I've got one more question about the book before I ask you a few other things. What for your evolving fan base, your readership? What are you hoping that they take away from this novel? I think if you are coming from Shades of Magic, that I hope it feels like coming home. Because that's what it felt like to write it, and that was really what I wanted it to feel like as a reader. If you're coming from Addie or Vicious or any of my other books, and this is your first time setting foot in the Shades of Magic universe, I hope you feel welcome. Like, I've done everything I can to make you feel welcome.
And that really speaks to me with regard to the warm relationship you have with your readers. Yeah, it's a very when I've seen you with readers at Forbidden Planet elsewhere at conventions, it seems to be it's a very personal relationship to you.
I think authenticity and vulnerability have always been a part of it. Some of it's just by virtue of the fact that I started quite young. And at the time that I started, there wasn't a huge amount of transparency. And so when you're a writer, which is already a very lonely profession, and you don't see anyone else around you struggling, you begin to believe that the struggle is a reflection of your ability instead of the fact that the work is hard. And so I think I just try to make my readers, who many of whom are writers and aspiring authors, know that they're not alone in whatever they're going through, that whether you're working on your first book or your 23rd, that the minutia, the daily struggle, not the finished work, but the showing up day in and day out to work on it, it's not easy. It doesn't have to be easy. It doesn't have to be simple, and if it's hard, it's not a reflection on you. It's a reflection on the fact that you're pushing yourself and you're trying, and the act of creating is a really vulnerable and difficult thing. And so my goal is really just to make sure that nobody feels as lonely as I did when I was starting.
I think that's lovely and very well said. And I think that inspirational role that you play with these readers and viewers, that must be a very satisfying thing.
I mean, I don't try to be inspiring. It's satisfying to know that it's vulnerability is frightening, and so it's satisfying to know that there's a purpose to it. You know, because it's not that it comes easy, and it's not that it's simple for me to put myself out there in that way. It's deeply unsettling, and it's deeply frightening. But I'm operating from a place of so much privilege in that I've got this audience, I have the success, I have the books, I have the career. If I can't be vulnerable, who can? You know, I'm operating from a place of relative safety. Of course, there's no true safety in that kind of vulnerability, especially like when you're queer. But like, again, if I can make anyone else feel a little bit less alone in whatever they're going through, whether as a reader and they see themselves in the pages of the book, or as a writer and they see themselves in the process that goes into writing the book, it's worth it.
This last 10 years for you has been an amazing creative ride, you know, and has been one of the great recent tales I can think of, somebody in our space having great success as a writer. What has that been like for you?
Yeah, I don't think, when you're going through it, I don't think it feels that way. It just feels like not quitting. Like, that's the thing, right? Is like, my philosophy my entire career has been, well, if the book does well, you're going to need another book. And if the book doesn't do well, you're going to need another book. And like, the fact is, I haven't put a different amount of effort into any of the books that I've ever published. The exact same amount of love and attention and passion goes into all of them, and they all perform differently in the market. And so it's really grounding, because you realize that you have to focus a lot less on what the book does once it's out of your hands, and a lot more on how to make it the thing that you're most proud of. And the last 10 years have been a lesson in it. The last 10 years have been a lesson in writing for an audience of one, and that audience of one being myself, and then getting the empirical data that supports that writing for an audience of one actually creates a space where millions feel welcome. It's very paradoxical. You think that you should be more general in order to be more universal, when the truth is, as a writer, you need to be more specific.
Yes.
And it's a very weird thing that I'm not sure I would believe if I didn't have the metrics from the last 10 years to support it. To be honest, on one level, I'm just so grateful that I'm still here. The mortality rate in publishing, high, very high. But I'm also very proud. I said this at my event last night, but I think, a lot of debut authors, when they're given really big book deals, when they have the success out the gate, their audience is a puddle. It's very wide, but it's very shallow, and it evaporates almost immediately. And over the last 10, 15 years, my audience has grown from a teacup to a lake. It had a much smaller circumference, but it was deeper. And so it's never evaporated. It's only grown with me. And I'm deeply grateful for that audience coming on that journey with me. And I hope they continue to.
I mean, as somebody who truly enjoys your work, I think, for me, part of it is that while you've got these great mechanical, almost world-building skills, it's what you said earlier on. You don't put that to the fore. I think the thing that really grabs people about your work are the human truths that you're telling, and that's what people respond to. Because it seems to be that many people who fabricate amazing universes spend so much time thinking about the macro rules of those universes that the human interpersonal drama gets lost.
Well, here's the thing: if you don't care about the people that the story is happening to, you won't remember the story. It's just true, especially when we look at series. Readers do not come back to the series for the plot. They come back to the series because they miss the people, because they want to spend more time in those worlds with those people. And I think if you don't center people, a book can be a fun romp, like it can be a romp, but when you've put it down at the end, what's left? Like, it won't sink its teeth into you. You need people to do that.
Yeah, very well said. Now, sticking with the topic of people, I know that you're in the middle of an extensive tour for the Fragile Threads of Power. We were talking a bit off camera about what that experience is like. How have you been finding this tour?
I mean, it's incredible. It's exhausting. It's my second tour of the year because I did an Addie LaRue paperback tour. And more of a celebration tour after Addie came out in October 2020, and so we weren't able to do one then. But no, I've been on the road now for more than a month, and I miss my pets. But the thing that makes it all worth it is getting to meet readers. As I said, writing is a really lonely profession, and so getting to have an opportunity to travel in America and here, specifically over the last month, and get to connect with readers and get to see their tattoos from these books and get to see their costumes and get to hear a little bit about what the books mean to them. You know, of course I have an online presence that allows people to connect with me to a certain extent, but it's never going to be the same as looking out onto a sea of faces and knowing that they're all there because you have a shared hallucination, because I've made something up which lived in my mind and now lives in theirs, and I can't really think of anything grander.
Neither can I.
No.
I get it, and it just must be so lovely, those interactions.
I mean, it's incredible. They're exhausting and they're incredible. I'm a deeply introverted person who really loves my rituals and routines, and tour kind of strips them all from you. But I wouldn't change a thing about it. They are just wonderful experiences. I've been in a different city every single day.
Yeah. Well, as we've talked about in the past, I've spent a lot of my life at Comic Cons around the world and whatnot, and that's without being a famous author whose work people love, right?
Yeah.
But you know, it's such a tiring experience. It's wonderful, but you're beat at the end of the day.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's exhausting. You're 5 a.m. wake up calls. Yeah. You are catching a train or a plane or a combination of trains, planes, and automobiles, getting there just in enough time to maybe shower, clean up, brush your hair, change into a new outfit, go sign books for 2 to 3 hours, then do the event, and then repeat it the next day in a different city. And like, what a luxury. Like, it's not lost on me what an incredible luxury that is, because I didn't get to do it for the first years of my career. And so I will never see it as anything but a gift. But as one small human in the world who is used to having a ritual every single day in which I get up and I walk my dog and I write my books and such, it is tricky because suddenly you go from having everything in your control, specifically the work, and knowing that you're creating each day, to being in a receiving mode where everything is out of your control and all you can do is be the recipient of the energy. And it's wonderful, but I would be lying if I said I wasn't ready to get back to work.
I hear you. You touched upon a few moments ago The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue.
Yes.
A book we're very proud to publish at Titan, as we are, The Fragile Threads of Power, as we are everything.
Yeah.
But Addie LaRue was a truly special book, and I know it felt truly special to you. Can you talk a little bit about that and what the reception to the book was like?
I mean, it took almost 10 years to write.
Yeah.
And then it came out during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I thought that would be not a death knell. That's overly pessimistic. My books have always taken years to find their readers, and so I was prepared that it would take years for Addie to find her readers. And when you're writing, you certainly don't write with the context of release in mind, meaning when you're writing a novel, you have no idea what the world will look like when it comes out. You can't control that part. There's so much you can't control. So I certainly didn't write a novel about stubborn hope and defiant joy and finding small happiness and living in an eternal present and being lonely, expecting it to come out during a worldwide pandemic where everyone felt like they were alone and trapped in an eternal present and searching for small happiness. But I think it landed in a lot of ways. I like to think, of course, that it would have found its readers any year that it had come out. But I think to come out in the first year of the pandemic, it became a little bit of a lighthouse for a lot of people. It's so funny because I am not Addie, I am Henry Strauss. in that book. I am not an inherent optimist, though I'm trying to be better about it. But yeah, it's been overwhelming, of course. It's a bit of a blessing and a curse, because I wrote 19 books before Addie LaRue, and they're all fantasy. Addie is fantasy too. I always think it's very funny when people think that Addie is not fantasy. Fantasy, we have one image in our mind, and yet fantasy is as diverse as any other genre. Almost everything we consume these days is fantastical. But I wrote 19 books that were all clearly fantastical, and then I was convinced that Addie would be the death of my career, because I almost published it under a pseudonym, because I was like, this is a terrible idea. Yeah, it doesn't fit with the rest of my catalog. And then after Addie, I thought, oh, everything else I write will be the death of my career, because people came to me and they're like, oh, I'd like another book like Addie, and I'm like, so would I, mate. Like, I'm sorry, but it doesn't exist. And so I think I listened to a really interesting TED Talk by Elizabeth Gilbert in the wake of Eat, Pray, Love, where she says you can essentially be taken down by a success of that magnitude, or you can be liberated by a success of that magnitude. And so I think I've tried to choose to be liberated, meaning that I don't ever want to turn success into safety. I want to turn success into ambition. If I can't emerge from the success of Addie LaRue and try to be even weirder and even bolder and even more risk-taking, what's the point of success? You know, I don't want to use it as a reason to retreat into the safety of the no. And so that is personally my favorite thing about the success of Addie LaRue, is that it's giving me a modicum of creative freedom to be weirder, to write a book like Gallant, which never would have been published early on in my career because it's quote unquote unsellable, right? Doesn't market itself easily. And Fragile Threads of Power, which is like 700 pages, and my next novel, which is about toxic lesbian vampires. And like, I just want to be ambitious and strange. And for so many years early on in my career, I was told that I would never be commercially successful because I was too quiet in my writing. I was too strange. I wasn't romance driven. It wasn't thinking mainstream enough. And so it's very satisfying to be able to sell books without having to change who I am as a writer, and proving that there's room in the market for me.
I think that's a wonderful sentiment, and also words to live by. Now, as we're talking, this evening you're doing your signing of Forbidden Planet. Yeah. Looking forward to it.
I am. It's going to be about 150 people. It's quite a small signing, so I'm very happy for that. But I am excited because it's my only live signing in the UK. Because of the nature of my events now, I sign everything in advance of the event so that the event itself can be a little bit longer. I usually do like a 45-minute interview and a 45-minute Q&A with the audience. So this is going to be the only time when I get to actively have face-to-face time with readers in the UK, and I am really grateful for it.
That's wonderful. I hope you have a wonderful time. I know that
I'm sure I will. I'm sure I will.
The Forbidden Planet Massive, we're always so excited. Yeah. Usually exercised when you're in town.
I'm super glad to be here.
And Victoria, before we wrap up, what can you tell me about that next novel of yours that you just mentioned? It has the best, 3-word
toxic lesbian vampires. Yeah. It's my reverse Addie LaRue. If Addie is a book about immortality and hope and joy, this is a book about immortality and hunger and rage. But after that will come the second book in Threads of Power, and then there will be Victorious, which is the third villain's book, and then there will be the third book in Fragile Threads of Power.
Wonderful. Yeah. I can't wait for them. I know you have, but I also know that you'll super deliver. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome
for coming in and speaking to me today.
It's my absolute joy, and I must say, it's a very pretty book.
It's an incredibly pretty book, and I'm going to put the.
I was going to say, I'm not biased at all by the size of my name on it.
Well, that's what I like. I love that font as well. That typeface.
Yeah, it's really great. It's excellent, and thank you so much.
Oh, it's always such a total pleasure to see you, and at Titan, we're so pleased and proud to be bringing your stuff into the UK. It's just such a privilege.
Thank you so much.
And it's always lovely to see you.
Yeah, I love an excuse to chat.
Yeah, me too. It's lovely to see you.
Great to see you.
All the best. Thank you. If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.